Wom, wom. Hello, everyone. So here we're going to take the sacred hoop cycle and bring it into a very practical level, which is the learning hoop cycle. Because just like we go through our own cycles through these periods of time, we also go through that cycle as we go through a learning process. And as we've explored, we have just stepped onto one of the sacred learning trails. And when we step onto that trail with intention and with right etiquette, that path comes alive. It's conscious, it's leading us and guiding us, and it's inviting us into these conversations as we honor the cyclic movement of our own process of learning. And so my intention here with sharing this is that you'll be able to, one, identify which stage of your cycle you're in for your learning hoop, how to honor that stage in a good way so that it comes alive, and how you can release yourself of any stress or pressure and shift away from this very detrimental Western mindset of trying to be rigid and disciplined in learning, and instead come back into this indigenous way of learning where we are aligning with these rhythmic cycles of nature and our own learning process. When we do this, we discover that we will gain access to the deeper learnings that are readily available to us. And they're readily available to us if we honor our learning hoop cycle. So with this, I hope to share how to walk your path in a sacred way, how to honor each stage by knowing what stage you're in, and how you can maybe even frame your learning through this process. So with that, I'm going to begin with a story. If my screen will change here. There we go. And this is a story of why some trees stay green and why the owl hunts at night. And here we go. So when the plants and animals were first made, they were told to watch and stay awake for 7 nights. All the animals and plants wished to do this because they knew if they stayed awake, they would be given a special kind of power. So the first night passed, and all the animals and all the plants stayed awake. It didn't seem that hard to them, and some of them even started to boast about how easy it was. When the second night came, however, it was no longer so easy for many of them. Some found it very hard not to fall asleep. When the next night came, some of them could stay awake no longer, and by the 4th night, nearly all of them had fallen asleep. When the 7th night finally ended, only a few had stayed awake. Among the animals, only the panther and the owl had not slept, so they were given the power to see in the dark. From then on, panther and owl would be able to prey on those animals which had failed to remain awake and watchful. Among the plants, only the pine, spruce, hemlock, cedar, laurel, and holly had remained awake and watchful. Because they were faithful, they were given the power to remain green all year around, and their leaves would now hold great medicine. But all the other plants would have to lose their leaves each winter. And not only that, they would have to also fall asleep until the warmth of spring came again. So it is that to this day, when young initiates go off for their wilderness vigil to fast in the forest or the deserts and pray for their medicine, they remind themselves they must stay awake like cedar and spruce and pine. They must look into the dark with the vigilant eyes of panther and owl. For great medicine never comes to those who are not watchful. Oh, and that is the story of why the trees stay green and why the owl hunts at night. And within the story, we see that there is a natural rhythmic cycle. And again, we come to the importance of the time of rest, that we are all given the gift of being able to come into the dreaming and integrate our days. And we also see from the story how when we can stay vigilant and focused with our intention, we may be awarded these gifts, will receive a boon from that which we seek. And so here we are, as we begin our learning cycle, we begin again in the Northeast. Now, before we dive into this, I want you to know that there are two specific ways you can apply this learnings here. One is to be able to recognize what stage you are in and what is surfacing from within you. And the second is you can apply this to actually framing your learning process, from doing your sit spot to studying or what have you. If you apply this sequence, you will really activate your learning process. And so those are two different ways of doing this. One is knowing what stage you're in and honoring it. The other is using this to actually frame your learning experience and come a little deeper into the process by applying ritual and ceremony. So here we are, and we begin in the Northeast. We begin with ritual. And by ritual, we mean we do that which brings intention into what it is we are doing. We express our gratitude for our teachers, for the land, the animals, for the plants we are apprenticing to. And in that, what we're doing is we are sinking our hearts and our minds and our whole being into the act with our learning process. As we mentioned, you are stepping onto one of the sacred learning trails. And so when you acknowledge that shift and moving and stepping onto the path, and you honor it and acknowledge it, it comes alive. And it leads you, guides you, leaves you clues. It's inviting you into these conversations, and you have access to these conversations in degree you are honoring the hoop cycles of your own learning process. So we begin with ritual. And this is also that moment of inspiration of where you are being called to explore. And then in that, we enter the next stage where we feel more inspired. You may start reading some poetry or plant journals. Maybe you start watching movies that are related with nature, looking up YouTube clips on tracking or plant identification, medicinal uses. In this way, you start to bring that content into your being and you feel that sense of inspiration, right? And then we move into the next, which is that state of activating. And so we're starting to bring that inspiration into ourselves and bring it into action. And this may be going to your sit spot. It may be doing your sense meditation throughout the day. It may be some other activity, but it's allowing you to begin to really arrive into that sensory awareness and experience. And then as you move forward into the south in the summer, you come into that focused study. Now that you've activated, you've done your sense meditation or whatever that act was, you're ready to begin that focused energy of learning something, of apprenticing to the plants, the tracks, the animals. And so this might be plant journaling, mapping out your sit spot, tracking animals, just being in nature. You already have this natural intuition on coming into that focus. And so what you're doing here is, rather than forcing this or pushing this, this is actually just an organic stage. And that's the beauty of this learning hoop cycle, is that it's organic. And it's really not about trying to force these things or schedule them, but instead it's acknowledging which stage are you in. After you are in your focus stage, you're going to come into the southwest. And that's that time to pause and refresh. You just put all this energy into learning something. Maybe you spent the afternoon really learning about a specific plant, apprenticing to it, smelling it, tasting it, harvesting it. And now you're like, oh, It's time to just release all that focused energy and just allow yourself to come into a restful state. In yoga traditions, this is normally when we would do a shavasana, where we would meditate and just release all our tension and come back into alignment. And then after that, we move into the time to harvest and to share. And this is when we move into our story of the day. What was the highlight of your day or your learning experience? What is it that you're harvesting from what you experienced and learned? And so that is that next stage. And again, each of these is organic and intuitive. And what you're doing here is learning to spot them, acknowledge them, and honor them. After you do your share and your story time, it's time to come into a little bit deeper reflection. Ask the next level questions. These questions might be like, if you found a new plant to greet, you might ask, I wonder who was growing next to stinging nettle, and wonder if that's consistent that other plant always grows. Or, I noticed something was nibbling on its leaves. I'm curious what eats stinging nettle leaves. Or you found some scat, and you're like, so you start asking those next level questions that bring you into that deeper inquiry that may bring to surface the deeper or other relationships that are involved with place. Then after some reflection, you go into the winter time. That's that Thomas time, and that's the time to integrate. Allow yourself to rest. Let go of any pressure to try to sit at your sit spot or do your mapping, and instead just let yourself be in the process while your internal systems are naturally integrating what you learned and creating those new neural pathways within your body. Right? When we go to sleep at night, we're sleeping so our body can reconfigure, integrate, absorb, process. So this is what this time is. So what you're learning here is a way of honoring your learning cycle. You're learning how to learn in alignment with the ways of nature. You can see how our Western mind has this rigid approach of just trying to cram information into us, trying to stay rigid and keep a consistent flow, but that's not how we learn. That's not how nature reveals itself to us. And so how you can apply this is just become aware. Which cycle are you actually in? Are you within the beginning of the inspiration? How much you create ritual and intention? If you're in that focus time, honor that focus time. And like Owl and Panther, just really bring your energy into that. And if you start to feel that sense of tiredness, honor that. Never feel pressured you're supposed to be at any certain place within the program. This program is to go at your own pace because you are on your own sacred learning trail, which has its own agenda, its own consciousness that is related specifically with you. So when it comes time to rest and you're not feeling motivated to do your sit spot, don't. But bring that intention in to integrate what you have learned. Learn to honor each of those stages. And what I recommend, and this is a very powerful way to really amplify each stage, is when you recognize you're moving into one of those stages, take a moment to pause and say, hey, I see I'm moving into the spring section of my journey here, and I give thanks. And I honor the teachings and the wisdom and the inspiration that'll come in. And I invite in whatever you might want to invite in. And if you do that as you move through each of these systems or stages of the cycle, you will notice how your path comes alive. And you'll gain access into these deeper learnings, deeper layers ready to speak and communicate with you. And this is that shamanic way, because you're coming back in to be a part of nature, where instead of pushing to receive and take, you are availing yourself to receive the gifts that is being readily offered to you. So again, this is a sacred path, the sacred learning trails, and each one is unique for each of us. So honor that. Provide yourself that sense of grace, compassion, the sense of bringing gratitude into each step that you walk. Because you are the only one who will walk your path. So if you have any questions, again, I'm available to you. Just let me know.